Welcome to the Thought Leader Podcast. Get ready to hear powerful stories, unique perspectives, and bright ideas to impact the world in the areas of health, wealth, and relationships. We interview experts, authors, executives, entrepreneurs, and other industry thought leaders who share new strategies, practical tools, and best practices to accelerate your personal and professional results. This is the Thought Leader Podcast. And now, here's your host, Elena Fernandez.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Thought Leader Podcast. Today, I have an amazing guest. Her name is Colette Peterson, and she is the Fidelity Fairy Godmother. So really, really grateful to have Colette here. She's going to talk about a lot of amazing things on how we can infidelity proof our marriages if we have them.
Yes.
And that is amazing. So Colette has lived through a lot of experiences. I'll let you tell our audience, Colette, about your story, but I'm really, really just amazed when I hear your story and when I hear about the strategies that you help people and you walk them through to save their marriages. So tell us a little bit about your journey and welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Well, I was raised in a religious community, and so was my husband. So we didn't believe in being physical with each other, with your romantic partner before marriage. So therefore, we tend to like to get married a little bit younger because, those hormones kick in and you want to be with each other. So at the age of 19, I married my husband and he was 22. So I was still technically a teenager, but not for very long. But anyway, it was young. And I just assumed because of our upbringing that there wasn't any need to discuss infidelity or how to prevent that from happening in our marriage. And I thought it would make my husband feel like I didn't trust him if I did bring it up. So I didn't bring it up, and we just went along our merry way in our marriage, and it was good for a while. But over time, the stresses of life began to pour down on you. And my husband became a workaholic. It was largely due to his business, but he was gone a lot. And I wanted to be his best friend, but he wound up giving that job to other people that he spent so much time with at work. And since we hadn't discussed infidelity proofing our marriage and what boundaries we might be able to put in place that would help us stay out of that area, my husband began to share too much emotional connection with some of the women that he worked with. And it became a real problem. One day when they started going to a different hospital to work, they decided they would ride together because it was farther away and why take two vehicles. But my husband didn't ask me if that would be okay. I just happened to see it happen. I see her climb into what I considered my seat in his vehicle. And it really upset me. And I thought, well, maybe I'm just being a silly, jealous woman, and just, don't worry about it. So I never said anything. And I wish that I had. I wish we had had that discussion then, because that was one of the problems that brought them closer. They spent more time alone together during their rides to and from this one area. And they spent a lot of time together alone after work. They'd start to go have lunch together. And, they thought it was innocent, but it brought them close. And eventually, not only was there an emotional affair going on, but it became physical also. Mm-hmm. And so it went on for several years before I finally found out. And come to find out, the first thing that I found was my husband had actually started an online affair, and he had a hard time sleeping at night. So he would be up playing on his computer and started playing games with people around the world. And so I woke up one night at 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that, and he was not in bed. And so I felt like I needed to go check on him. And I came around to his office, and he was sitting in a chair with his back to the door, so he didn't see me. And I stood there and watched him have this conversation with this woman. And it was initially it wasn't anything terrible, but just getting closer to each other. But when they decided, oh, it's late enough, we better head to bed, when they said their goodbyes, then there was cyber hugging and kissing as they said goodbye. So after he was done, I kind of gave him a little scare, just kind of jumped at him, and I told him that what he was doing was inappropriate, and I didn't like it, and that I wanted it to stop. So he agreed, and for some reason at that point, it wasn't terrible, but it was something that I did not feel good about, but I didn't fall apart at that point. So the next day, after thinking about it, I guess he decided that he wanted to tell me more of the story, more of what had been going on, because apparently he told me later that he knew he couldn't stop if he didn't tell me, but he was afraid that if he told me that he would lose me. So the next day, he told me that he had kissed two of his coworkers. And then I fell apart. Oh. And it was terrible. It was terrible. And as I thought about it throughout the day, I just knew there was more. I knew there was much more to the story. And so as we went to bed that night, I said to him, I know there's more. I need you to tell me. And he said, but I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose you. And I said, well, if you don't tell me, you will lose me. But if you do tell me, you'll at least have a chance. So he told me the rest of the story. And I was utterly devastated. But my heart knew it all along during that day, and I had some nudgings a few months previous to that. Our oldest daughter was about to be married, and I just had this thought, what if something's going on? And then but with the wedding coming up, I told the Lord, if there's something going on, I don't want to know until after the wedding. So it was about a month, almost 2 months, I guess, after the wedding that I finally found out what had been going on. And it had been going on for several years. And so it was pretty devastating.
Wow. I wanted to ask you, because you say your daughter's about to be married. So how long were you married at this point?
At that point, it was 21 years.
Wow.
Long time.
Incredible. And I want to ask you a follow-up question, because I'm fascinated by your story, in that it's so heartbreaking, and yet you tell it with such strength. And some things really stuck out to me when you're telling your story. Number one, you wanted to speak up when you saw something, and then you said, oh, I'm a silly, jealous woman. And right. I think that this is universal to us humans, especially women, maybe.
Right.
We really second guess and shut down that little small voice that tells us, you gotta do something. This is not okay. Set a boundary. And yet we don't want to rock the boat, or we don't want to ruffle feathers. There are many ways to say this, but tell us more about that. Like, how do you feel about that now?
I recognize now that it was the truth talking to me. Often our guts tell us the truth, and we just, if we're not taught that, then sometimes we just think, oh, I'm just being silly. But our guts really do have our guts are our second brain.
Mhm.
And when we feel something in our gut, we need to trust it and we need to question it and find out what's really going on when our gut tells us something. So, and if I had known that then, I would have done things differently. I certainly would have said something then. Plus, I am now aware that that driving together regularly with someone of the opposite sex that's not related to you is not only crossing a boundary in just in making sense, but even with our church, it's a rule that I didn't know we had. You know, it's just not talked
Mm,
about as much as
yeah.
I think it should be. You know, so I want to make people aware. You know, like an occasional thing. You know, when it's necessary, okay, but when it becomes a regular thing, you're getting into trouble. You know, it's a
Yeah,
danger
I
zone.
love that. I love that you have these boundaries that protect this relationship. And let me ask you about this, because I have boundaries. It's something that I have learned over the years. And just like you, I recognize that the lack of boundaries really, affected me and impacted me negatively over the years. And what would you say to those people that, like me, had a negative and limiting thought about boundaries, saying, I don't want to be controlling?
I'm sure that's the way I felt too. But if you think about fire, fire can be a really good thing if kept within the proper bounds. If you've got a fire pit or, stove or and you're cooking food or you're using it to keep warm, as long as it stays within its boundaries, fire is a really good thing. But if you let it escape from its boundaries, then it causes destruction. Forest
Yeah.
fires, burn a house down, it just causes terrible destruction. So that's the way we need to look at boundaries. Boundaries are there to protect us and to keep us safe. And
Yeah.
if we love our spouse so much that we want to be with them forever and want to have a happy marriage, then you better put some boundaries in place, not because you don't trust each other, but because we are all human. And just like fire that can escape if you don't keep it within its boundaries, if we don't have boundaries set up for ourselves and help each other to maintain those boundaries and stay within those boundaries, we can fall out of those boundaries. And no matter how good of a person you are, it can happen to anybody if you don't have those boundaries in place and try to follow them.
I love that. And you often talk about how to approach that topic of boundaries in a loving and non-judgmental way. So how do we do that? And what does that make possible?
So if we go about it in a loving way, I think first of all, you need to show your spouse some love. Give them, tell them how much you love them. Give them some compliments. Put your arms around them. Make them feel loved. Don't just say it, but make them feel loved. And then maybe ask them a question. Do you love me so much that you want to be with me forever, as much as I want to be with you forever? And if they answer it with a yes, then it's like, well, there are some ways that we can help each other do that. We can help each other stay faithful, because that can happen to anybody, no matter how good of a person they are. If they don't have proper boundaries in place, will you discuss maybe putting some boundaries in place for our marriage that we can help each other with to help each other stay faithful? I think when it's said in that way, where it's not, they don't feel like you're judging them. They already feel your love. And it's not just for them, it's for both of you, because it can happen to anybody. We can help each other by deciding what boundaries we think are important. And then we can discuss it regularly and kind of just check in with each other. Sometimes as often as every day, maybe, just an easy way is, how was work today? And you know, you know, anybody that catch your eye today, or is there anything I need to worry about, or can I help you with anything? Being in a framework of helping instead of being judgmental is the way to go about it.
Wow, that is so enlightening. Thank you so much, Colette. This is beautiful. Now, I do have a follow-up question because this is so interesting to me.
Okay.
And you can see my wheels turning. So what I am thinking is that before you come to that place, there's got to be some processing, right? When you see something happening, especially in your story, as you see this woman getting into your seat, I can imagine that for myself, how that would feel. What are some steps between that? Like between feeling that maybe sense of indignation or anger or jealousy or whatever we label it, and then having that conversation. What are some steps that we can take in between to actually get us there and move us from that energy to a different, more less judgmental and from abundance is what I'm.
Yes. So if we've seen something that has upset us, that has concerned us, then I think the number one thing you need to do is go to the Lord in prayer and say, help me with this. What do I do with this? As a woman of faith, I believe that the Lord and his spirit can help us tremendously. And so when we take it to the Lord in prayer, and take some time, pray as many times as you need to, and then take a piece of paper and pencil and make a list or whatever. I like to do writing during prayer, actually, because I feel like when I put the pencil to paper and I'm in prayer and I just start to write, I write something, I find out things come out of me, whether it's from my own heart or whether it's directly from the Lord. It works together, and it helps to clarify what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and also what the Lord's advice for you might be. And so taking that step back and giving it some time instead of having the discussion with your spouse immediately about what you're upset about, because that could go very bad. You need to take that step back and figure out what it is you really want to say. And then you need to make sure that you put your comments make sure that they know that you love them. Mm-hmm. And that this is a concern, and use I statements. Say, this is how this makes me feel. I feel hurt or concerned or upset when I see this. And don't attack their character, but just say that you probably don't realize, but when you do this hurts me in this way. And then allow them a chance to explain why they may have done that. Or they will probably say, oh, I had no clue that would upset you. And I can see what you're saying, how that might be concerning to you, that maybe I should do that differently. So take some time to think about it, write it down, and go about it with the Lord's help.
Wow. Thank you so much, because I can see how, having that space to ponder upon it, for those people who are not religious, the way that in which you explained prayer, as a pondering, as a search for answers, as a way to kind of write out and search within yourself for a more loving way. I think that is beautiful. I particularly pray a lot, but I know that not everybody does. And I think that in the way which you explained it is accessible for everyone. And I really love that. What if the person when you confront them, because, I can see that in your story, your husband wanted to come clean, but he was afraid. So, so the fear may make someone defensive, or maybe, respond, even if you go about it in the right way, in the most amazing, loving way. What happens when there's defensiveness, or maybe self-protection in a way that attacks you, when you're trying to give this person a loving framework and I statements and the benefit of the doubt, because that could be very hurtful.
Yes. I think you need to prepare yourself for that, because I'm sure it would happen in a lot of situations. So just if you're prepared with the fact that that may happen, tell yourself not to react, not to get defensive back at your spouse, and let them say what they need to say. And if you use good attentive listening skills, try and say back to them what they have said to you, and say, is this what you mean? That's what they should be doing to you. But if you do it to them instead of reacting back to them, that will help calm things down. That's part of getting into the love and respect cycle. Is very similar. So men and women have, of course, similar needs, but our number one need is different. Men have as their number one need the need to be respected. So if their wife is saying something to them that makes them feel disrespected, then they're going to lash back at their wife. And he's probably going to say some things that make her feel unloved. The wife's number one need is to feel loved. And so they're similar, but they're different. And so if we stop the arguing and the defensiveness, on even if it's just on one side, and say, okay, what does my spouse need? If it's the man that's being defensive, then the woman better be giving him some respect and telling him the things that she does respect about him, and help the situation to calm down. And the reverse for the woman. If she's upset, then the man better be giving her some love statements. And one thing that can really help is just some physical contact. Even before you begin your discussion, if you would just hold your spouse's hand, or just, sit close to them, maybe put your hand on their arm, give that physical contact, that shows love, and it helps a person to feel loved and also respected to a certain degree. So those things will help.
Wow, it's no wonder that you've done so much research, because it shows that these answers are fire in a good way.
Thank you.
And I really love, I know that you've helped a lot of people, a lot of your clients, people that come to you for insight as to how to cherish their marriages and protect their marriages from infidelity. And with that being said, you talk about great communication skills, and I think we've touched on many of those skills. Are there any others that you would want to share with us besides, attentive listening and using I statements and adding that physical touch? What else should we look at in terms of great communication with the spouses?
Make sure that you are doing your best to make your spouse feel loved and unthreatened. And so trying blank here. I would like to share an example with you of something that happened to me. It's not exactly about communication, but we'll get back to that in a minute. But when I was at a conference one time, it was a 2 or 3 day conference. And so I was away from home and staying in a nice hotel. And one day after all the events were over, I hadn't really gotten to know anybody and I was there alone. And so I decided to go have dinner at their nice restaurant there. And it was a nice day. And so I went and sat out on the veranda. And as I was sitting there, one of the gentlemen from the class that I had been attending came out onto the veranda to have dinner also. And he was away for ways away from me. And I was actually newly divorced at that time. And I was just learning to be more open and friendly with people. And I wasn't looking for anybody or anything, but I just saw someone that I recognized. And so I thought, oh, I would just be nice and say hi. And so I just kind of waved at him, oh, hi, And he sat down, and after a minute, I could see him getting really nervous. And I didn't have any intentions of doing or saying anything or going over to him. I wasn't hoping he would come over to me, but he got really nervous and he got up and left. And, I thought, good for you, because he was worried that I might want to, to come and sit with him and whatnot. And I had noticed later that he was wearing a wedding ring. And so he was protecting his marriage, even though nothing would have come of it because that wasn't my intent. But he was concerned enough and thought enough of his marriage that he wasn't taking any chances. And he got up and left and removed himself from the situation. And I am very proud of him for doing that. Oh, here we go. Okay, with communication, make sure that you are not talking over the other person, because that shows that you're not really listening and that you don't really care about what they have to say, that you just want them to listen to you and do what you want. And it's very disrespectful. So make sure you don't finish their other people's sentences either, because that also shows disrespect. And you might know what they're going to say, but people need to be heard. And if you're interrupting them, finishing their sentences, talking over the top of them, then that makes them feel disrespected and unheard. I remember there were times when I felt very unheard in my marriage, and it was a devastating feeling. We all need to know that we are listened to and heard and really understood. So we need to try and say back to them what that they have told us, and say, well, first of all, give it a pause. When they tell you something, pause, think about it, and then say back to them what you thought you heard, and say, did I get it right? Is this what you're thinking? Is this what you're feeling? That is so empowering to the other person. And it makes it so you can understand each other better, because sometimes, we all wear different colored glasses because of our past experiences. Our brains are already conditioned to think something or feel something. If you have a car accident and 10 people witness it, you're going to get 10 different statements on what actually happened, because everybody sees it according to what their previous experience has led them to believe. So when we're listening to somebody else talk, we've got to be careful to not let that kick in. And then that's why it's important for us to say, I think this is what I heard. Is that correct? And if it's not correct, then our spouse can say, well, kind of, but not quite. And then they can explain again, hopefully say it in a different way that is that will register with us.
Wow, that is powerful. And, I think that those are very simple tips, but, I can think about how easy it is to go the other way. So thank you so much for that powerful and simple framework. And with regard to your story, Colette, So I hear that you are divorced.
Yes.
And so you say that it is preventable, infidelity, but do you think after it happens, it is irreversible?
You've been listening to the Thought Leader Podcast. At Thought Leader, we help experts, authors, executives, and entrepreneurs land the most credible and authority-building stages in the world to spread their message and their impact. If that's you, visit thought-leader.com and click on Schedule a Session to get started. Now back to this episode of the Thought Leader Podcast.
No, if both people want to continue the relationship and work on it and build it back up again, it is possible. And all of these strategies will help. These same strategies will help. But both people have to want it, and they have to be willing to work for it. And that was the reason that we divorced, is because we didn't have these tools back then. I didn't know all this then. And my husband didn't want to go to counseling because he didn't want to be told that he was wrong. And so we didn't get any help. And the only thing that changed was his behavior, I think. But we weren't able to get the friendship back and the trust back and the closeness back because nothing else changed. We didn't have any more time together. We didn't, he was actually still working with the same people. And because, I can't train somebody new. I've spent 10 years training her. And so that should have been one of the things that we said, no, you got to work with somebody else,
Yeah.
That was another one of my mistakes.
Yeah. It's like that man removed himself from a situation that didn't even seem threatening in the moment to you. So I really love how you say I'm proud of him, because it does illustrate how your perspective is so clear in what the boundaries should be when you have this sacred bond of marriage. And in that, when you say we didn't get the trust and the friendship back and the connection, I know that you teach couples on how to create a strong emotional connection with their spouse. What are some of those things that you teach people, and what are some strategies to kind of get that trust and that connection and that friendship with the spouse, and to keep it if you have it?
Okay. First of all, you need to spend not only quality time together, but enough quantity time. If you have almost no time together, it's almost impossible to make it work. You need to carve out time for each other and then make it quality time. So for quality time, you need to spend time talking. And when the other person is talking, do deep listening. Take turns. Again, reflect what they're saying. Make sure you're understanding. Really pay attention to what they're saying. Don't be distracted by your cell phone. Don't do it while the TV's on. Don't be distracted by anything. Physical touch is so important. We've talked about that already. And make a point of, we don't want to have it in such a way that every single time my husband touches me, I'm afraid it's going to end up in sex, because that can become a problem. But it should go there at least once in a while, But so so make sure that you are giving physical touch that feels good and non-threatening. Surprise your spouse once in a while with little things, whether it be coming home with their favorite candy bar, or a small bouquet of flowers, or doing the dishes one night when maybe she's taking a nap or something. Do something that will surprise your spouse and make her feel good, and him. Maybe it's going somewhere with him that he normally goes alone. Make sure that, if there's something that you don't normally like to do, say, oh, I'd love to go with you this time. Make sure you're doing things that show that you want to spend time with your spouse. Be vulnerable. Make sure that you're letting your guard down and letting them see who you really are, and allowing them to show their authenticity to you as well. Recognize in yourself if you're being reactive, because it's human nature. This takes practice. And if we all of a sudden, if we start to get riled up and become reactive, then stop and think, oh, I'm becoming reactive. Okay, say it out loud, say it to them, and then take a step back and say, let me just calm down for a minute, regroup, and then you can begin again. If there are things to be remorseful for, make sure that you show and say your remorse from your heart. Because just saying, well, I'm sorry, that doesn't cut it. You need to say it with your heart, with true feeling, and really mean it, because they'll know the difference. Also, along with reacting is being defensive, a similar situation there. Make sure that you don't become manipulative by saying something like, well, if you don't change or you don't do this, then I'm going to divorce you. That does no good at all. That just backfires, makes it worse. Make sure you're being completely honest. Honesty and transparency is so important. I found out later on that my husband wasn't being completely honest with me when we were during that 3-year period, trying to fix our marriage. And you can't build that trust when there's not honesty. You need to make sure that you include humor in your relationship. Need to learn to laugh together. Go to a funny movie, or pretend that you're a teenager again, chase each other around the yard and tickle and do things like that. Anything that can bring laughter and humor into your relationship will be a big boost. Inspire each other to do whatever each other wants to do. You need to be their support system and say, I know you can do it, and help them to dig deeper into themselves so that they can improve themselves. Make sure that you watch your tone when you're talking to them and don't express contempt. So just do all the positive things. And whenever you find yourself starting to do something negative, take a break, walk away, and then come back in the positive fashion.
Wow. These are, really, really wonderful techniques to become closer. And, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because you keep saying, that was my mistake. That's one of the mistakes I made. And for many of us, but you were faithful, right?
Yes.
And so when I hear you, taking responsibility for the things that you could have done better, and that's actually the premise of your business as a thought leader, is you are using the things that you could have done differently to teach people to succeed in their marriage relationship. So how did you get there? And is there a difference between blaming yourself and finding these ways that you could have maybe used to prevent the infidelity from happening, or are because he's the one that was unfaithful? So let's talk about that. Let's unpack it for our listeners and our viewers today.
Okay. Blaming doesn't do any good. Things happen. It's the past. Like Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. And so I did the best that I could at the time with what knowledge and tools I had. I wish it had been better. I wish I had what I have now, but I didn't. So, you just have to recognize that and let it go. and learn from it and move on and make a better life ahead. So and blaming the other person doesn't really do any good either. I have learned over the years also that my husband had some problems and issues that were partially causing some of his behavior, but he could have done better if he had had better tools and better knowledge. But if I had had the knowledge and could have shared it with him, that would have helped tremendously. But so you learn from it and you move forward. And yeah, the blame doesn't do much good. What else? What am I missing that you asked about?
I wanted to know how you got there to that acceptance and that, that awareness.
Okay. I spend a lot of time in prayer, and I know not everyone is religious. Prayer is a form of meditation, and meditation without thinking of it as prayer is, works well too. So you need to get in touch with your higher power, whatever that is, even if it's just within yourself. And you need to approach it with love and acceptance, and ask what you truly could have done different. I've spent time on the internet and looking, and I've made all these different questions of what I could have done differently, and I found so much information from different places on the internet and marriage.com and so many different places. And it has helped me to see that there really is a formula for protecting our marriages and cherishing our marriages. When a marriage feels cherished, when the partners in the marriage feel cherished, it's like almost nobody else exists. And that's the way it should feel, and it's the way it should be. Our marriage should be the most important person in my life is my spouse, and I will do everything to make my spouse feel loved and cherished and to never hurt them. And they should always be the first consideration when you're going to do anything. So I've spent hours and hours and hours thinking about what I could have done differently, and I just know that prayer or meditation has helped me a lot. And I feel like the Lord has really taught me many, many, many of these lessons. And I am just so grateful that he has done that for me, and that I have learned what I need to learn so that I can help other people. I wish somebody had been there for me and taught me these things, and that I could have saved my marriage, but it didn't happen. But I feel impassioned to help other people protect and save their marriages.
Wow, I really love that you're sharing this and that you're looking at it from a non-judgmental place, not only for them, but also for yourself. So thank you so much for saying that. And I love what you said, that that you wish it's normal to wish it would have been differently. So I love that you mentioned that. And in that saying, you wish somebody would say something. And I think in society, that's not true in my culture, but like in this society that we live in, people want to stay away from marriages. And your work is to be inside of the marriage. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, when we see a friend or, or friends, because, I'm friends with couples, and something is off. Should you intervene? Should you tell them to get help? Like, what do you do when something starts to be off, or maybe you see you talked about those preset boundaries of spending time with other people. Maybe you're as an outsider seeing this happen with somebody else's wife or husband. what is the protocol there?
That's a little tricky. You don't want people to feel like you're being too nosy or getting into their business when they haven't invited you. So, yeah, it's sometimes you have to wait for them to maybe, make sure that for me, I want to make sure that they know what my business is and that, I help people with this stuff so that and maybe just let them know. I'm just give them a business card, say, this is the work that I do. And if you happen to know anybody that needs any help, let me know.
I love that. So as myself, I could say, oh my gosh, I just interviewed this amazing woman. And, if you know anyone, hint, hint. Okay, yeah. I love that you said that, because I think that you are a true expert. You've done your research. You know how to help people. You have successfully helped a lot of people in their marriages. But I think that we each, as people, love to help, and sometimes we forget that we're not qualified to do that kind of work. So that was kind of where I wanted to take things here with that question, because even though we wish, and this is true for myself, like we wish that somebody would have helped, I think that it's really important to get the help of professionals that are trained, qualified, and experienced in this area.
One thing you want to make sure you don't do is talk about marital issues with friends or coworkers or whatnot that do not believe in marriage and have your best interest at heart. You need to surround yourself with friends who are happily married and who believe in marriage and would want to help you instead of helping you disparage marriage and tear it down. So you need to be very careful about who you talk to about any kind of marital problems.
Wow, that's so powerful. Yeah, I love that. And what about for people who are, you're starting to be married, or maybe just got engaged, or maybe they are thinking about a possible future life together. What are some boundaries they can set, or some maybe routines they can set to not only protect but also to cherish their marriage, which is the twofold mission of your business?
Well, they need to make sure that they're maintaining appropriate boundaries with members of the opposite sex. And I know that's a generalized term, but I just want them to think about keeping sacred what should be sacred. A marriage between a husband and wife should be a very sacred thing. And so if you go with that overall umbrella thought, that will help. Recognize that work can be a danger zone. In the old days, it was mostly just men that worked outside the home and the women were inside the home. And so it wasn't so much of a problem. But these days, the majority of women work, and it can be a problem if, people are put together to work on projects, or if they just naturally gravitate towards each other. And so you just need to try and do things in groups as much as possible. Don't lunch with the same person all the time. Don't take coffee breaks with the same person all the time. Just always try and make sure that you're in groups. If you find someone who is having a hard time and they want to share all of their intimate emotional details with you, try, if there's someone that is attractive to you, try and find someone else who would be a better fit for them, that wouldn't potentially ruin a marriage. So if it's someone of the opposite sex, try and find someone that is of the same sex that they are, that they can talk to, so that you don't get that emotional connection, because it's those emotional connections that lead you down that path. So as much as we love to help people, if it's done in a group setting or someone of the same sex, then that, works better, but just got to be careful with that. If you have an old flame, try and make sure you keep those old flames from reigniting. So if you're going to be somewhere where an ex is going to be, make sure that you either take your spouse with, if that's possible, or make sure that someone else is with you, and just do whatever you can to mitigate any being with that person, so that your spouse doesn't worry so much. And then make sure that you, if your spouse is not able to come with you, that you tell them about what your experience was at that event where they were at. Make sure you don't cross the line with internet friends. Again, it's the emotional connection that brings us down usually. So, I mean, there are a few people in the world who are just after sex, but most of us are just wanting an emotional connection. But that emotional connection should be with our spouse. And if we start making that emotional connection, whether it's in person or online, we're just asking for trouble. So set boundaries there. And if you're talking to someone online, make sure that you can involve your spouse. Let them look over your shoulder with whatever you're doing. If emails are sent back and forth, allow your spouse to look at your emails, and just be totally open, honest, and 100% transparent. And then these problems won't arise. And again, don't drive alone with anybody. That was my last one.
Yes, of course. I mean, after 17 years of, pondering after your marriage ended, and doing all this research and studying and helping people, I love that you have all of these concrete things, not only from your personal experience, like that last one tip, right? But also all of these other ones that you've collected from your clients and your research. And I'm really grateful that you're sharing this with us. We're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you, Colette, you share the one misconception that there is about infidelity in marriage, and I really want you to share it with everyone.
The one misconception is that only marriages that are in trouble are fall into infidelity. Even a good marriage can fall into infidelity. I thought my marriage was pretty good. But if you don't have those boundaries up, don't realize that they're important, these things can happen. My husband always wanted to, he liked to get inside people's heads to see how they thought, and it especially happened with women, and he thought he was innocent, but that's how the emotional connection started, and it went from there. So even if you think your marriage is good, even if things are good in the bedroom, it can still happen. So you need to have these discussions and put these boundaries in place, and then talk about it regularly and do it with love, and it will make a huge difference in your marriage.
That's amazing. Thank you, Colette. And to end, this is a podcast about being a thought leader. What is a thought leader? How are you a thought leader?
Well, I think being a thought leader is putting new or important information out into the world that will help people. And so we all have different experiences and can share our experiences and our knowledge, the knowledge that we have learned because of our experiences. We can put it out there for the world to experience and learn from, so that hopefully they won't have to make the same mistakes that we've made or that have caused heartache for us in our lives. So it's just sharing our wisdom. It's what a thought leader does.
Yes, and we will have all of your information in the notes so that people can contact you at on your website and also through social media. And is there anything else before we end that you want to share with everyone? Something that we might not have covered, or maybe just some last words of wisdom?
I just want to remind everyone to cherish your marriage, cherish your spouse. If you'll do that, that means treat them like they're the only person on the planet that matters, because they really are. And if you will do that, you will have the best marriage in the world. So guard your marriage and make it wonderful.
Thank you, Colette. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. We would like to know what you thought about this episode. And please look in the notes to find Colette's information so that you can connect with her and learn more about her passion of protecting marriages and preventing infidelity as the fairy godmother of fidelity.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
And so we've covered so much today, and it's been so empowering and enlightening. And I want to know, are there any words of wisdom or simply last wisdom, any last wisdom that you want to share, or anything that we haven't covered that you want everyone to know?
Yes. I would like to remind you of the story of Cinderella. She had a wonderful fairy godmother that helped her with her beautiful dress and got her all beautiful with her hair done and ready to go to the ball. And she was able to get her Prince Charming. But we don't really know what happened after they got married. Did they really have a wonderful marriage after they got married? Did they know how to protect their marriage? Did they know how to cherish each other and prevent anything bad from happening, such as infidelity? We don't know. So when I thought about the story of Cinderella, that's when I began to think that it would be fun to consider myself as the fairy godmother of fidelity, because that's what I want for people, is that, because I didn't have this knowledge and these skills when I was in my marriage. I floundered, and my husband did things that he shouldn't have done because he didn't know either. But I want to be that fidelity fairy godmother for other people that can teach them the things that they can do and should do to help protect and cherish and nurture their marriage so that they can have a wonderful marriage. So that's why I decided to call myself the fidelity fairy godmother.
Oh, that is so amazing. Thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you for providing people with that magic to keep their marriage alive. It's been wonderful to talk to you and learn from you. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today in this amazing conversation with Colette Peterson. She is the Fidelity Fairy Godmother. I can't wait to hear what you thought today.
Thank you, Alina. It's been wonderful.
That's it for today's episode of the Thought Leader Podcast. Visit our Thought Leader Talks YouTube channel to browse all episodes and show notes, and to continue the conversation. We love to hear your feedback, ideas, and success stories. And don't forget to subscribe for more expert information, insights, and inspiration. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Thought Leader Podcast with another relevant conversation you don't want to miss.